Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Different Strings, a new guitar podcast. This is episode 2. And Andrew and myself, my name is Wes. We're going to be talking about social media product demos or product demos that are spread widely through social media. We consider YouTube to be a social media source. So we're going to be talking a lot about YouTube and things like that. So we're going to get on with that. But first, Andrew's going to tell us all about how you can find Different Strings on social media ourselves, because
That's right.
hey, social media, we all live or die by it at this point.
Engage with us, please. Okay. First of all, we don't have a lot of friends. I'm just going to say it out loud. I have no friend. We need some of you to give meaning to our life. So first of all, you can find us on Twitter at Diff Strings Pod. You can find us on YouTube at Different Strings Podcast. In fact, you're probably watching this on YouTube right now, right? Okay. All right, so don't worry about that one. Facebook, search for Different Strings Podcast, and Instagram, up and running, different.strings.pod. And email us at differentstringspodcast@gmail.com. What do we want? We want your comments. We want your questions. We want your feedback. We want your suggestions for future episodes. We don't know what you want to talk about. You just want online therapy for an hour? Let me know that. All right. Let's bring it. I mean, none of us are agreed. Yeah, we'll help you out. Life coaching, you need that? You want us to help you with grocery shopping, trips to grandmom's house, whatever you need, just reach out to us and we're happy to help you.
We're not qualified for any of that.
Shouldn't do that. All right. So just email us your gear related questions, your suggestions for future episodes. Give us feedback. Like, look, we want to tweak this to be more entertaining, more fun, more enjoyable. And we're both new at this. I mean, Wes has experience with podcasts, but me, I just started. So yeah, tell us what you want and we'll do it.
I'm trying to find the name of a song of a band. There's a instrumental surf band, and I can't think of the name, but the song is called Like and Subscribe, and it's like this really cool instrumental song, and then a computer voice just comes over and goes like and subscribe, and it's hysterical. And yeah. I feel like that's such a social media thing. You see it in every video. Like they Wes, have to remind us,
right? Smash that like button.
That's right. They have
hit the bell for notifications. Yeah, you can't comment on this video.
Because this is obviously the first video you've ever watched,
right?
So we're gonna ramble a little bit less this time. In the first episode, we made sure we wanted to kind of express our bona fides and talk a little bit about why we're doing this and what our backgrounds as guitar players are. But if you've listened to the first episode, watch the first episode, then you know all that stuff, and you'll find out more about us as we go along. So we're going to jump right into our appetizer. And this ties in, as we're going to continue to try to do, with our theme for this episode. So, Andrew, I'm almost always going to make you start with this because I'm the one asking the question. But we're going to talk about social media, product demos on social media today. So I'm curious if you ever have bought a piece of gear, any piece of gear, guitar, pedal, cable, anything, strictly based on a demo that you saw or heard online. And if you've done that, and I'm sure you have because we all have, how did that go for you? Was it a positive? Was it a negative? Do you have a mixed bag of experiences? So why don't you hit that for me?
I do. So yeah, like you, I'm sure, we've both bought our share of gear based solely on the online demo, meaning we didn't ask for feedback on any of the forums. We didn't hear the piece of gear live. We didn't know anything about it until we saw someone demo it, whether it was on Facebook or YouTube or whatever. I recently bought 2 pedals by Walrus Audio, fantastic company. And the pedals themselves are top-notch build. The artwork is inspiring. I love looking at them. They're really cool. I also love that the same pedals have different looks over time. So, I mean, I think that's kind of cool that they're doing that. But I bought 2 pedals, the ARP 87, which is a delay pedal with multiple modes, and I bought the Fathom Reverb. So I bought them based only on the demos. I had never heard of Walrus Audio in the past. I knew nothing about them. And I just saw product demos and I was immediately hooked. Now, when I got them, I have been struggling to get them to play nice in my rig. Okay. There's nothing wrong with the pedals. They sound fantastic. I don't know that they work for me, but they were very much like impulse buys, like, wow, they sound amazing. I'm definitely going to be able to find a use for those.
Yeah.
And it's just not something I really like. I'm really struggling to find. Now, on the other hand, I got a golden reverberator from Universal Audio to not replace the Fathom, but as a different flavor of reverb pedal. And that one fits right in. Okay. It's got the classic spring reverb that I'm used to, and it drips. It's amazing, this thing. Um, and it's got other like the Hall and plates, and it's incredibly realistic, but more importantly, it familiar and fits better with like my style.
Right.
So there was a piece of gear I bought based on the demo and immediately went out and I'm like, I have to hear that in my house and with my rig. And it's worked out incredibly well. The Fathom, it's just not like my thing, but that was like I said, an impulse buy just based on the demo alone.
Well, send it to me. I'll try it.
Yeah, I will do that.
Um,
What about you?
yeah, I find myself almost exclusively making gear choices based on an online demo and the reputation of the builder. And I'll tell you one time that it worked for me and one time that it didn't. So during the pandemic, because nothing was in person during the pandemic, everything was crazy.
Yep.
I wanted a guitar with P90s, and I prefer 3P90s because once upon a time I had a PRS custom 22 soap bar that had 3 soap bars in it.
I
And
remember that guitar.
yeah, it was a great guitar. I never should have sold it. Story of my life. Um, and so I'm in a very, very Fender place the last 10 years or so. So I wanted to get something with a bolt neck because I'm comfortable with that. I'm familiar with it. I wanted a maple neck. Um, and so I did some digging around and I came across, do you know who Greg Koch is?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So Monster Player, and he does a bunch of demo videos for Wildwood Guitars. I think they're in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And he's funny and he's a great player. And he
Wicked,
does,
wicked
yeah,
player.
one of the things he's really good at that I appreciate is showing all of the different sounds that a guitar can make. And I know I don't play like him. I know I can't make a guitar sound all the different ways he does, but I know if I hear something in there that pleases me, that's probably going to be something I can deal with. And he did some demos on a Reverend Jetstream 390,
Mm-hmm.
which is an offset. It's got 3P90s, it's got a maple neck. And so then based on that video and really just that video alone, I went on Reverb and I found a used one and I bought it and I got it. And I absolutely hated that guitar in every way that you can hate a guitar. There was nothing wrong with it. It played fine. I set it up, put new strings on it, adjusted the neck, all that stuff. It sounded decent. It sounded, of course, I don't sound like Greg, and I call him Greg because we're buddies. It sounded fine until I plugged it into any of my amps.
Mm-hmm.
And me sounding that guitar was not pleasant to the ears for me at all. I even tried recording it just to see, like, am I just hearing something weird? Is it my messed up ear frequencies or something? It was one of the worst gear decisions I've ever made. And I've played other Reverend guitars that are fantastic and they're built well. I don't have any problem with the build quality. Just that was based on hearing somebody else play it. It did not work out for me at all. And I flipped it. I turned it around and traded it for something else.
Wow. So, I mean, I think that is, first of all, it's a very relevant story, but it's interesting how, you can hear a guitar in the hands of someone like Greg, and it sounds, but did you know what he was playing through in the demo? like what amp he was
Um,
playing through?
if I remember correctly, it was just a Fender, standard Fender amp. It wasn't any kind of special amp. It wasn't like his signature amp that has like 3 channels and 72 knobs. Um,
Yeah.
and it was one of those things. It didn't click with me. I didn't like the way it sat on a strap or in my lap. I didn't Once I got it set up within an inch of its life, I still didn't like the way it played.
Wow.
It just
Wow.
was not my guitar. But the flip side of that is, so a couple of months ago, Vox did this new little solid state amp based on, in conjunction with Brian May. They've got a
Yep.
series of amps called the MV50, which is just this tiny little amp. And they've got different ones. They've got a normal Voxy one. They've got a high gain one. They've got a ultra clean one, et cetera, et cetera. So they did this Brian May one. And I listened to Brian May play it, of course, because they're going to put out a video with that. And I ordered one immediately, but I didn't even buy it. I just ordered it, and it wasn't going to be out for several more weeks. Part of that is I'm so heavily influenced by Brian May that as you can see on the wall, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see my Brian May guitar on the wall behind me. I love that thing. And I know what I sound like when I play things that he plays. And I know I don't sound like Brian May, but I know what I sound like when I play like that. And I believed, and it played out, I will sound like me, only louder through this amp. And it turned out to be exactly the case. It
Wow.
was a beautiful experience, and I love the little amp.
That's cool. So getting back to the what was it, Reverend?
Yeah, the
Um,
three Jet
yeah,
Stream at 390.
I find that interesting because it's rare, at least in my experience, that a guitar will sound great through like only a certain kind of amp or whatever, right? Like to me, I have a lot of guitars right now, and I like how they sound through every amp, and
Yeah,
that's why I
yeah,
keep them, right? But
agreed.
if I come across a clunker that it only sounds good through one type of amp or one, then it goes, because I like my guitars to be, multi-dimensional and versatile, um and I like them to sound unique, right? So no one's going to mistake the Tele for the Strat, but I like it to work with almost any amp. And it's
Yeah,
weird that Reverend just you couldn't make it work,
I
I
couldn't.
and I think it has a lot to do with sometimes a clunker leaves the factory,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Not every piece of wood and not every wound pickup is going to sound like every other wound pickup or piece of wood. Like you just
Yeah,
never know what you're getting. And had you had the chance to try that guitar in the store, you may have gone, "Oh, this thing's garbage," right? But you didn't have a chance to do. Sorry, that guitar may not have been garbage, but you know where I'm going. Like, you didn't have a
yeah,
chance to feel it, hear it, you know.
yeah. And I'm still looking for a P90 guitar, and I love offsets, and I still love the idea of a Jetstream. So I haven't ruled it out. I just know that specific one that I had did not work for me. So I'm still holding out hope that what I heard in that demo um proves out. I just need to find the right guitar for me. And I think and anything that's mass produced, whether it's in the United States or overseas, doesn't matter. Most of it's a bell curve, right? All of life is a bell curve. 80% of them are going to be just fine for
Mm-hmm.
most people. 10% are going to be clunkers, 10% are going to be amazing. And
Yep.
that's life. That's manufacturing.
Yep. And I think
Because
you're touching on something we're probably going to get more into later about, like, why does this happen? You know,
Yeah, well,
like,
why don't we move on to our main course then, which is the meat of this, which is those product demos that we're consuming on social media. And we can talk about consumption and influencers ad infinitum, but the way it used to work, and here's my Gen X showing, we would go downtown or go to town or the next town over, walk into a music store. Somebody would greet us, give us a little bit of side eye because we were teenagers. And, we'd say, "Hey, can I try out this guitar?" And they would put us in a corner with some little solid state amp and the guitar and give us a cable and say, "Hey, do you need a pick?" try not to bother the customers, don't turn it up too loud. And then we could sit there and play the guitar, and we could try, hey, do you mind if I plug this into a different amp just to see what it sounds like? Or one of the things I used to do, I had back in the day, I had that Boss 6-slot plastic pedal board,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So if I was really super interested in a guitar and I really wanted to see how it sounded like through my stuff, I would take my little Boss pedal board and I would go to Veneman and say, hey, and I would pick a time during the day when it wasn't likely to be busy. So I wouldn't go right when they opened, and I wouldn't go half an hour before they closed. I would go on Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
and that I felt like that was going to get me a little bit of slack from the staff. But
I
and
wasn't always that polite. I'd go in on a Saturday when it was stupid busy. No. Sometimes it just,
yeah,
I would.
sometimes that's what you got to do. And in my mind, anytime I go into a Guitar Center or a Sam Ash, which is, for better or worse, the two music stores that I have access to now, um, there is a mom and pop music store in my town, but their focus really is on selling accessories, cables, strings, picks, and lessons, which is kind of where the mom and pops have migrated to a certain extent, which is, a different topic. But if you want to try out a variety of name brand gear, you've got to go to Guitar Center or Sam Ash or one of those places.
Yep.
And it's cacophony, unless you go in there, like I said, at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon or whatever, and then you might be able to actually hear what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I like to do is ask if I can take this into one of the lesson studios,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't typically have lessons in the middle of the afternoon on weekdays. So a lot of times, they'll let me do that and I can hear it. Or sometimes, like at Guitar Center, they might have a quiet room or a loud room or whatever they want to call it. And you can go in there and do that. But I always, I don't know that it's them. It's probably mostly me and my anxieties and my own personal baggage. I always feel like I'm being a burden when I ask them to let me do special things like that. So I tend not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that almost forces me to rely more heavily on these online demos.
Yeah.
And so it's also that when we were young, um, and we went to those mom and pops, that was a lot of times the first time we were able to see more than a print ad out of Guitar for the Practicing Musician.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
Yep.
the first time we were seeing the pedal or the amp or the guitar or whatever in person, or even at all. So I know I feel like I'm going to come down hard on these online product demos. And part of that is my feelings about social media in general, which can be a power for good or evil. And kind of my biases towards these folks that we call influencers, and trying to separate those two things, the product and the person, can be really difficult for some people. And I freely admit that sometimes I make my gear choices not with my ears, but with my conscience,
Mm.
based on what I know about the company and how they fit into the industry. Or, for example, and I'm not going to say the name, the political views of a pedal builder that I cared nothing about when I first bought one of their pedals, and I love the pedal. And then they opened their mouth on social media and destroyed my opinion of them as a person. Still a good pedal, but I gave it away, because
I understand.
yeah.
And so your experiences when you were young, obviously similar to mine. If I was guitar shopping, I'd walk into Jerry's Music, or, locally around here, there's a couple shops, but I'm talking about Philly, 30, 40 years ago. You'd walk in and put your hands on the guitar.
Yeah.
You knew before you bought it what it was going to feel like in your hands. And if you were guitar shopping and you had an opportunity to bring an amp with you, like a small carryable amp, then you knew what it was going to sound like through your gear.
Yeah.
If you were amp shopping, and I still do this today, if I'm amp shopping locally, bring a guitar with me.
Yep.
I want to know what this amp's going to sound like with my stuff,
Yeah.
minimally one of my guitars. If I'm pedal shopping, I may still bring a guitar. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
and now I, and this is a future episode we're talking about, but my local shop choices are limited, just like you said, to Guitar Center and Sam Ash. And I mean, the good news is they have more stuff than the locals do sometimes. The bad news is, depending on where you're shopping, they could they could be heavily weighed towards the low end or the high end.
Right.
So, my local Cherry Hill Guitar Center that's managed by I'd call him a friend. I've been going to that store for over 20 years. He's known me longer than my son's been born or been alive. Um, Weighted towards the high end. They're in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. He's got a lot of good connections. He gets great vintage gear. He gets high end stuff that other guitar centers just don't get. And he takes care of the store, and the stuff's in pretty good shape. Whereas if you go to a guitar center in a different location locally around here, they weigh heavily towards the lower end.
Right.
So it's a mixed bag. But they still don't carry everything, and none of them can. And more often than not, a lot of the stuff I'm buying right now, I'm buying without putting it in my hands, without hearing it in person. And it's unfortunate that we're losing that ability to gain some hands-on experience with the gear. But because we're losing that, then we have to take other things into account.
Yeah.
Like, I never had to worry about a return policy on a guitar that I played first. And I'm like, man, this thing's awesome. You'll have to bury me with this. I
Yeah.
didn't care about a 30-day return policy. Now I care about return policies a lot. I care about, how long do I get to try this before I have to send it back? That's important because and will I have to pay for that return shipping? Because if I don't like this thing that I never got a chance to play in person, are you going to penalize me with a restocking fee, or and understand that I just never had a chance to hear it in person, and maybe this thing just stinks, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
um
absolutely.
there was
That's
a period of time. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that's one of the reasons why I buy used a lot, is because if I buy a piece of gear that is a dog, which happens, or if I just buy a piece of gear that doesn't really fit my rig, my fingers, my mind, then I feel like I'm not out that much money, and where if you buy something new and you don't like it, you turn around and sell it. You might take a 25, 35, 50% loss on it. If you buy something used, you don't like it, you turn around and sell it, you might lose 5 or 10%.
Right. Right.
And when it comes especially to pedals, I tend to buy low. So, I bought a phaser that I didn't care for. I paid $50 for it. I turned right around, put it back on reverb for $50. So I lost whatever the fees were. I think I ended up coming out $8, lost, which was, for me, that's not a bad fee for finding out you don't like something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I was going to tell you of a story many years ago. I don't know if you remember that PRS did a Dave Navarro signature model.
Oh yeah, that was a white custom 24 with gold hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a stunning, stunning guitar. It was like Arctic white, whiter
Yeah.
than white,
Right.
the opposite of none more black. It was just a
Exactly.
beautiful guitar.
Now, there was nothing unique about this guitar from a mechanical perspective. The Dave Navarro signature was legitimately a stock custom 24 that looked different. It was in a finish they didn't offer on their standard custom 24s.
Yeah.
And it had the Dave Navarro plate, but there was nothing unique about this guitar sonically. So
Yeah, it didn't have special pickups. It didn't have a special neck carve. You
Right.
know,
Right.
it was the Arctic white and the gold hardware that made
Bingo.
it the SIG model.
So, having experience with many custom 24s over the years, when I saw this and knew I had to have it because white and because gold hardware and because Dave Navarro,
Yeah.
um, I I ordered one without with with total confidence that I was going to love this thing. Total confidence. Now, the first one that I don't remember where I got it, but the first one that showed up, um, the white finish, the white paint had bled all over the edges of the fingerboard.
Oh no.
Okay. Now, what was surprising was not that this happened because finish bleed happens.
Sure.
What was surprising was that Paul Reed Smith let it leave the factory,
Right.
because you've seen as well as I do the videos of them sawing bodies in half of guitars that didn't live up to standard. And
Yeah,
that's something they take pride in.
absolutely.
Right. So I actually called PRS, not, and I, even though I didn't get it from them, I called PRS and said, hey, there's a guitar. It's got all this white finish bleed on the fingerboard. Like, it just looks really unattractive. I'm really surprised. And I didn't, and they said, you know what, you're right. That does not happen frequently. White finish, they said, for some reason is very hard. For some reason, there's something about this white finish they were doing that made it very hard. And that was happening a lot. They said, I'm sure your dealer will help you. And they did. The dealer took it back and sent me another one that had the same problem.
uh,
I,
well, and you know that that kind of that illustrates something to me, in that, you know, because we have less ability to try gear in person,
mhm,
we have to, and I hesitate to use this word because it's such a buzzy word, we have to outsource
mhm.
our expectations, our trust to the manufacturers if we're going to buy on their reputation.
That's
And I
right.
think that's one of the places where product demos really come in handy, is it gives us a backstop if we're not familiar with a company, if we're not maybe impressed by their manufacturing reputation, um, those, or if we've simply never heard of them. I mean, there are what, 72 million pedal companies out there at this point.
Mhm,
And you've heard of, you know, if you're casual, you've heard of 5 or 6 of them. If you're into it, you've probably heard of 20 or 30,
mhm,
but there are still so many more. I mean, I'm not even heavily into pedals, and I probably have, you know, 20 different builders
mhm.
in this cabinet behind me, you know.
Join
Um,
the Facebook group Pedal Boards of Doom. I know I mentioned them to you. If you have, you will learn of a
I'm
new pedal
afraid.
manufacturer every day,
I'm
which may
afraid.
not be a good thing for you.
Yeah. So, you know, we before, where we may have outsourced our trust to the manufacturer and set that level of expectation there, and then maybe been disappointed or even excited or pleased with the results, we now have the opportunity to outsource our trust to YouTubers, to influencers, to people that are making product demos.
Mhm,
But is that necessarily a great thing? Because, you know when I record, I make little guitar videos that I put on my YouTube channel. Um, and I I almost pride myself that the sound is just what's coming into my phone. I don't use a bunch of microphones. I don't put reverb on it. I don't put compression on it. What I hear in the room, what my phone hears, is what you're hearing compressed through YouTube's algorithms. Um, and I don't know if that's stubbornness or not, but at least I know that anybody that listens to it is getting perhaps a more realistic sense of what the sound coming out of the speaker is like, because I'm not adding a bunch of studio trickery. You know, we talked about Mutt Lange and Def Leppard's Hysteria in reference to Mutt Lange and AC/DC's Back in Black, which was our Music That Matters for the first episode. And when you think about how produced hysteria is, for good or ill, doesn't matter where you fall on that, but it is absolutely produced within an inch of its life. There are YouTube videos, there are product demos out there that are just as produced
Yeah.
as that album,
Hmm.
as any album. And that that makes it hard for me sometimes to trust 100%, especially if I'm watching a product demo on a guitar and there's a ton of reverb and delay on the sound, and I know that when I plug it into my amp, say I plug it into my Supro that doesn't have any reverb in it,
Hmm.
it's not going to sound anything like that.
No.
So that product demo, I don't want to say it's useless to me, but it's not as helpful to me as it could be. And what I end up thinking the video is really about is marketing.
Mm. Let's get
And
into this. Yeah, I want to get
but
into that.
all right, let's dig into it.
All right. So you said we've outsourced our trust, and I want to, that resonates with me because in essence, what we're doing is we've given up our, it's been taken away from us, our ability to try things out, and we're now saying, you know, we're picking influencers or YouTubers or what have you that we trust and saying, if you say it's good, I believe you, and I'm going to buy that thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are some influencers or YouTubers or what have you that I will almost, first of all, if you listen to things like Pete Thorne, who doesn't love Pete Thorne? Super nice guy, monster player, um, incredibly respectful to other musicians, the industry. Like he, he's a monument to what a great musician
Yeah.
can
And
be.
and and on top of that, he's an absolute gearhead and he understands, he
Mm-hmm.
knows tech stuff.
Yeah.
He's not, and I'm not bashing anybody who doesn't,
No.
but Pete Thorne is a great example because, you know, he knows what's going on inside an amp, and he will often talk about gain stages and
Mm-hmm.
signal paths and things like that. And I
Right.
dig that because it's something that I'm fascinated by, and so it helps me connect with those videos.
Yep.
Please
And
continue.
yeah, and he's a self-professed like you gear nerd, guitar nerd, right?
Yeah.
And I love how in depth he gets, and also I love that his demos are incredibly professionally produced. Like he basically writes a new song
Yeah.
for every, and he's got so many videos. He's so prolific. Um, but I also know he can make anything sound good.
Yeah.
It is so much about, like, he knows Pete. Okay, it's
Pete,
not a, this isn't,
because we're buddies.
yeah, Pete. Um, he has he has the ability to know what he's playing, like the piece of gear, and play to that piece of gear,
Yeah.
right?
That's a great way to put it.
Like he, if you, when you put on a fuzz pedal, for example, you're not going to start playing a bunch of complex jazz chords because it's just mush,
Right.
right? When you put on a fuzz pedal, it's like single notes, high octaves, like big fifth chords. Like that's what a fuzz wants.
Right.
Okay. So Pete can do that with any piece of gear that he puts his freaking fingers on.
Yeah.
He can and will make anything sound good. Knowing that, I'm very careful about what I buy after listening to Pete demo it, because he can and will make anything sound good. And even though he's very honest in his videos, I also know that he's going to be super nice,
Yeah.
because that's just Pete being Pete. So like I would never only listen to Pete demo a piece of gear and go, I'm buying that. If
Right.
I listen to Pete
Yeah.
play
Yeah. Yeah.
something and it sounds amazing, I'm going to make sure I've listened to it through not a great player, not some, like someone who's not as good as Pete. He's someone who can do that. And you know who else can do that? Tim Pierce.
Yeah. That dude, man, for a guy I never heard of until about a year ago, he's played on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
And
and he's one of the Pete Thorne. I'm going to throw you another name, RJ Ronquillo.
mhm, yep.
He does fantastic product demos, and a lot of times he won't even talk. He
Wow.
talks very little. He just, he has one camera on the pedal and he's tweaking knobs, and he has, then another camera on him playing, etc. And that I hear where you're coming from, and I too would hesitate if Pete Thorne came on YouTube and said, "You should buy this pedal because it's awesome." My first instinct would go, "Well, Pete's always right, and I don't sound like Pete." So I'd be
No.
torn, and it occurs to me. So in my regular life, I don't make money playing guitar. I don't know very many people who do. And if you're listening
Wait,
to this and you make
can you
money
make
as a
money
guitar
playing
player,
guitar?
you can. You
Oh,
can make a
God.
living, like pay all your bills and have kids on top of it.
Mm-mm.
So I make my living as a journalist in the power sports industry, and I am sent a lot of product to, and they're always hoping I'm going to review it. My policy is I only review products that I like and plan to use for an extended period of time. If
Okay.
I hate something and it happens, I send it back to the manufacturer with my notes and tell them exactly why I'm not going to write a review or do a video about this product, because there's so much negativity in the world, Andrew. I don't feel like I need to add to it, and I think when I roll up to a motorcycle event and you see what helmet I'm wearing, and I've written a review and done a video about that helmet, then you already know I don't like other helmets that much.
Right.
So if by some stretch of the imagination you consider me an influencer in the world of motorcycle helmets, then I want you to experience what I like and not what I didn't like. And it's the same way for guitars, or
Mm-hmm.
for guitar stuff. I wonder, how many things does Pete Thorne get in the mail that he plays for 10 minutes and goes, "Wow, this thing is horrifying," and never does a video about it?
Uh, Pete, if you're listening, because I'm sure you don't, sure you know who we are and have plenty of free time. Tell us, how often does that happen? And actually, anyone who's listening, hey, if you're in the industry and you do this, tell us, like, put a comment in YouTube video, like, tell us what's going on. Like, do you
Yeah.
get products, and do you do what Wes does? If you don't like it, you send it back. If you like it, you review it. I think that's a great policy, by the way. I love that. And let's
Yeah.
be honest.
And on top of that, sometimes even if I do like it and it's a great product, but it's not going to work for me, I'll still send it back. I'll write the review and say, "This
Okay.
is great." And I'll say, and I will say in the review, it's not really going to find a place on my bike or in my shed or whatever, but this is a great product. And if you need it to do this thing, you're not going to be disappointed with it, which is not to say I'm not critical.
Right.
I don't shine over the negative aspects of something that I like, because, I don't love everything 100% unless it says Brian May on the front. Let's just be honest right there. But I'm also selective. Like, I'm not getting the little Brian May amp that plugs into the jack. Like, I'm not interested in that.
Right. So think about, so yourself, you're someone who receives products to review, and someone could seek out what does Wes think about this thing, because they've heard, let's say someone's heard about XYZ thing and they're like, I want to know what Wes thinks.
Yeah.
I've heard this is great. Does Wes agree with me? And if he does, now does that mean, okay, we got confirmation? I've got confirmation. I heard this was good. Now Wes said it's good. It must be good.
Yeah.
Let's
But
be
Wes is
honest.
just Wes, right?
Right. So even if that happens, there's still a risk that they could get that and go, this thing's ridiculous. I hate it. So I guess my question is, are we, when we watch these videos and we're like, oh, yep, that's what I want, are we just succumbing to confirmation bias?
Yes,
Are we,
absolutely. Next
right?
question.
I I asked a yes or no question. You gave me a yes. We're moving on, because I think that happens. I know it happens to me. That's why I'm asking that a loaded question. I know it happens to me. I've
Yeah.
heard this was good. I heard someone on some forum or some Facebook post or somewhere said this thing's amazing. I searched out videos on it because I watch a lot of Pete and Tim and all those guys. They come up first, or because they're very prolific. I watch their video. They agree. I'm done. That's it's in my hands.
Yeah.
If it's a piece of gear that sounds the way I want it to sound. So I think we have to be conscious of that, but we also have to be conscious of the fact that how a piece of gear sounds in someone else's hands is the product of a billion variables
Yeah.
that we cannot, some we may not be aware of, and that we can't replicate. Whether it's, think of a guitar, think of all of the factors. Just take the body alone, the dryness of the wood, the species of the wood, what part of the tree it was cut from, right? Like there's so many different variables that make up a guitar, the sum of a million different variables. So it's the difference. What's that bell curve? 80%, you said, right? 20%, 20%. I'm sorry, 80% is going to be in that you're good to go. 10% garbage, 10% truly special. You never know what you're going to get. You could, so I truly believe, and it's not just the instrument, or the piece of gear, it's the person playing it and their variables. If it's a guitar, how hard they, the type of pick they're using, how hard they hit the strings, how hard they fret, what their fingers sound like. I mean, we could go on and on and on. And then you have the signal chain. How did they record it? What post-processing was done? Even my crappy 30-second demos have gone through some level of compression and limiting, right? I don't always post that signal chain if I'm posting a demo. It doesn't seem relevant, but it is relevant, right? All of those variables. What's your take on that?
Well, and so take all of that into account, right? So you and I could play the same guitar through the same pedal into the same amp, play the same song, and it's going to sound like two different guitar players because we are, in fact, two different guitar players.
How about
right?
that?
So then, and now take all that, and if you do it at your house and I do it at my house, I'm doing it different, you're doing it different, and then the listener is hearing it. They're watching it on YouTube. They're using earbuds if they're on their phone, their headphones, maybe if they're in front of their computer. I watch a lot of YouTube on my TV with the Apple TV box. So that's just TV speakers. Those are not, amazing. As I found out, as I'm working on the mixes for my EP that's coming out later this year, there was a little plug there. I discovered that the best sound system I have access to right now is in my car.
Right. That's what we've devolved to in our listening spaces. Yes.
Yeah. And so, if you're listening to Pete Thorne do an amazing amp demo through earbuds, are you really hearing the full fidelity of the amp?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think we're making a lot of translations, assumptions, and inferences along the way when we consume a product demo. And then Andrew, put on top of that, it's marketing.
It's all marketing.
It's marketing. Even if, let's say, Fender does a lot of really great videos on their new products. They have a really fun YouTube channel. I love it. It's just, they get interesting players and they do fun stuff and they show off all the different things that the guitars and amps and pedals can do. But when I watch it on Fender's channel, if a new Strat comes out and it's on Fender's channel, I'm like, I'm being marketed to. I know I'm being marketed to because Fender wants to move units.
Right.
But on the same day that they have a new video on the Fender channel, they have just sent the same guitar to 20 YouTubers and they have new videos on those guitars too. And I look at those and it doesn't click immediately that I'm being marketed to because it's what's his name, Baker, or it's Music Is Win, or it's, Paul David's, and it doesn't feel like marketing because through my YouTube experience, I feel like I have a relationship, like Paul's my buddy, He's my
Mhm.
teacher. He's a guru. He's a dude that I trust
Mhm.
because we've spent time together one on one, just him and me. And so when he does it, it's not marketing, but when he does it, it is marketing.
That's
It's
right.
already marketing.
That's such a great point. I man, that also resonates with me because I know you could see like the wheels turning. It's it's insidious almost, but in a way, like I have a love-hate relationship with marketing. I always know it's happening, and yet I'm willing to let it happen because damn it, this content's getting better and better. It's almost
Yeah.
like they're coming down, oh, they really understand me as a consumer. Like they're
Uh-huh.
getting these guitar, they're getting these guitars in hands of people we trust. Like, the content is made in such a way that I truly believe what these people are telling me. And maybe maybe they are being honest. Like take a guy like Phil McKnight. Like I just discovered that guy.
Oh yeah,
And
he's the know your gear
yeah,
guy.
I just discovered his channel, and I love his approach where I always feel like he's cutting through the BS.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if he says, he'll never say good or bad. It's always what I think. Always
Yeah.
what I think, what he thinks of a piece of gear. And I really respect that. He'll never say something's good. He'll never say something's bad. Take the EVH Iconic, for example. This is apparently one of the most loved and hated amplifiers talked about on the internet right now. I have one behind me, and I may do a demo someday. Um, People are hating on this thing. He loves it. But what he said was, I didn't buy it, but I loved how it sounded.
Yeah.
But he's saying I loved how it sounded. He's not saying it's great, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's what he thinks, and I respect that. And I'm not saying that other YouTubers aren't doing that. I'm saying sometimes it's easier to fall into the trap when it's down home. I'm just talking, it's just me and you, Wes,
Yeah.
me and people. It's the content is, but we have to understand those demos are designed to be that way. Their marketing is meant to be subtle and insidious, and it's not always going to be in your face. And as long as you know you're being marketed to, I think, I think you're on the right track, right? I think you have
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Absolutely.
go in skeptical is what I always say, and then make your own judgment.
Well, and it helps to, do your homework when it comes to buying these things because social media marketing in general is designed to evoke emotional responses because people who have an emotional response to something behave differently than people who are not having an emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I mean, the entire beauty industry is based on an emotional response to your self-esteem and how this blush or bra or sneakers or whatever are going to make you look. And if you look good, you feel good. And if you feel good, you're killing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Yep.
it doesn't matter, almost doesn't matter if the product's actually any good. What matters is if you believe that it's good.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
so we get into that. We can get into a cycle where marketing is hitting us. And I consider social media part of the marketing world at this point.
at this point,
Yeah, it can hit us when we're vulnerable and trying to find something to make us feel good.
I would like to add to this social media conversation that what's the phrase? I think if I start it, you'll finish it. When something is free,
You're the product.
bingo. And when you are surfing social media, and I'm including YouTube in this because even though we pay for YouTube, some of us do, I do,
I do because
it's
I can't stand watching constant ads.
it's available for free. And I think even as a paying customer, I'm still the product because my preferences, my video choices, the things I click on, that's all being saved. How long I scroll, where I stop scrolling, who I watch, it's all being saved for analytics. And
Yeah.
what are those analytics used for? Marketing,
Marketing.
advertising. So we are the product. And when we are the product, we need to be very careful. And I
Yeah.
think another marketing ploy is FOMO, fear of missing out.
Oh, absolutely.
So
And
you and I talked about the Fender certificate of authenticity yesterday. You want to share
yeah,
that story?
yeah, sure. So for people who don't know, Fender and other companies, Fender is not alone. It's just Fender moves a lot of product with their custom shop guitars. They have a hand signed certificate of authenticity that says this guitar came out of the custom shop on such and such a date. It's such and such a model, and it's signed by somebody who works at the custom shop or works with the custom shop. It's not necessarily a builder, but it's somebody intimately involved in the operations of the custom shop. So you feel like you now have this piece of paper. It's legit. They do it with other limited run instruments that are maybe not custom shop, their production line, and you'll get a certificate. They've got, even now, at least with their American made instruments, you get a little certificate of legitimacy. It's not hand signed, it's just machine printed, but it's card stock, it's beige, it's got some embossing on it, it's got some color on it, and it feels so special. And people have put so much value on this little piece of paper
Mhm.
that I was trying to sell a guitar last year, and it was just a run-of-the-mill American Stratocaster. Actually, I take that back. It was a Telecaster. It was a American Professional 2 Telecaster Custom with the two wide range humbuckers or wide range pickups. Technically, they're not humbuckers. And I had absolutely lost the little certificate that came with it. The guy, I bought it used, and the guy that I bought it from sent it to me, and I put it in a Ziploc and I stuck it someplace safe that wasn't where I put everything else, and it was gone. And so the
Oh,
dude
so it's very safe. It's somewhere very safe.
yeah, I'll find it probably when I move.
Right.
But so I decided to sell the guitar because Telecaster, which is a whole different topic. And I could not find that piece of paper for the life of me. I found the original strap buttons, which were the only things I changed. I found the little toolkit. I found the little vinyl pouch they sell with them. I could not find that piece of paper. And the dude wanted me to knock $250 off the price of the guitar because I didn't have the certificate of
For the
authenticity
for the piece of paper.
for the piece of paper.
Oh, and Wes, how much did that piece of paper affect the tone of the guitar, would you say?
0%.
0%. How about the feel of the guitar?
0%.
Oh, okay.
It didn't change
Interesting.
anything about it. The guitar was still made in America. It was still exactly what it was that it said it was. If you took it apart, you would see all the stamps. It was exactly what it was supposed to be. And I ended up not selling to that guy because I wasn't going to give him $250 off for a piece of paper.
The funny thing about that is after we had that discussion, I thought about it and I said, okay, what if I was a buyer? Why would I care about the COA? And I have two answers. One is resale value, which is what you said.
Yeah.
Okay. The other is, how do I know I'm getting a real Fender and not a counterfeit? And then I thought, if you can counterfeit a guitar, you can
Yeah.
probably counterfeit a COA,
Yeah.
which
And
is
probably not too
ironic
difficult.
and weird.
Yeah.
No, no.
Yeah.
I mean, we put a man on the moon. If I'm pretty sure if we created a guitar, if we counterfeit one with the Fender logo, and
Yeah.
I've seen them, they look very real, then you could probably fake a COA. So I'm surprised he put that much value and weight
Yeah.
into a
And
COA.
it comes down to doing your research, knowing what you're looking for, which is probably the reason why we buy a bunch of stuff we don't need, is because we don't really know what we're looking for.
That's a
And we're
good
just,
point.
it's a little bit of retail therapy, maybe, or we're chasing a sound that we haven't quite defined yet. And we think a reverb pedal is going to do it when what we really need is a delay pedal or whatever.
Mhm.
We think we need an overdrive and what we actually need is a fuzz, that kind of thing. So I think the challenge in trusting product demos is consuming enough of them that you get a balanced view. and
Mhm.
that you can make a widely informed decision. And sometimes you got to watch all the way through to the end. Not just, that doesn't just help YouTube's algorithms. It helps you because I know a lot of people will save their critical
Constructive,
comments,
right.
to the end, because most people do not watch 10 minutes of a 10-minute video. They watch 7.5 minutes of it.
That's a good point. So when we're saying do your homework, we're saying, as you said, look for multiple sources.
Yeah.
Watch till the end. Get try to, if you can, try to get dissenting opinions. Like, I know we laugh sometimes about internet forums because opinions are like buttholes, but try to
Try to
try,
find one.
I would say intentionally look for constructive or less than positive feedback about a piece of gear. I have done that. I should probably do more of it, but look for, I want to know the bad and the good. Like, if this didn't work for you, like, it shouldn't be hard to try to get people to badmouth a piece of gear on the internet. Let's be
No,
honest.
no,
But you
it's
won't
not.
find that on YouTube necessarily. Even the videos that, when I was buying the Kemper, if you try to buy a Kemper now, you can find a million videos that literally say, "Do Kempers suck? Kempers suck." And then you launch the video and it's like, "The Kemper is the most amazing." I'm like, wait, the video thumbnail said Kempers suck. I wanted to see why they suck.
Clickbait, my
Clickbait.
friend.
Right. So find multiple sources, preferably ones who aren't being paid for their opinion. And I know that is challenging to find. I know
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
if you want to be careful with your money, do the homework. You don't, most likely don't have to have that piece of gear by tomorrow. I know that we live in a world where if you can have it by tomorrow, why not? But do your research. Look, pedals, maybe not, but guitars and amps that are hard to ship and heavy and expensive, yeah, like, just do the research and try to find dissenting opinions if you can.
Yeah,
And
because
also,
the
go
one
ahead.
thing I don't want to do is send an amp back.
No, no, mm-mm, no. Um, and also, if you're going to shop with reputable dealers with generous return policies, if
Yeah.
you're buying new, if you're buying used, be even more careful
Yeah.
because some places do not offer return policies. Some gear has lower resale value than others. So if you don't love it and you wind up having to flip it, G&L comes to mind. G&L makes amazing guitars, but their resale value for some reason has been notoriously lower than other companies.
Oh yeah, they're
Um,
great to get used.
yeah. So shop with reputable dealers with generous return policies, and because you don't want to be left with buyer's remorse and no recourse.
Yeah, buyer's remorse is a real thing. And even if you love a product, if you put it on your credit card, you get that credit card bill and you're like, "Oh man, I spent $400 on that." And even then you're like, "Do I really need it? Do I need it $400 worth?"
Am I not? And if you're never using it, that's, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
and I still regret buying stuff that I've had for a decade, and
it's like,
but
one of these days I'm going to sell this.
yeah, exactly. And I'm trying to be better about that, especially when it comes to guitars. Because, I don't need all these guitars. I just have a hard time letting go of them. And
uh, no, you don't need them. That's why this is fun,
yeah, I think
right?
that's the end of our friendship right here. We're never speaking to each other again. Clearly this is not working out. It's been a nice, no, I'm serious. Yeah, but those are all really good tips for like a successful navigation of product demos and online buying. Reliable sources, a lot of it depends not just on your impression of them, but a lot of times I'll like Google an influencer to see if people are talking crap about them and if it feels legit. And this is one time normally I'm big on naming names, but this time I'm not going to name names because I'm not 100% sure what the truth really is. But
Uh-oh.
there is somebody out there in YouTube land who purports to be a pedal and pedal board expert,
Oh boy.
and to the point where they build pedal boards and they advise people, and they've built kind of a business around this.
Hmm.
And it turns out that they were lying to people, and in a way that was discovered, and it was costing people money, and it was a bad news.
I know the story, and I know who you're talking about, and I've watched that person's videos, and I enjoy the content. I do think that individual truly regretted the situation.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That's my opinion. I don't know
Yeah.
for a fact. I also know that they did everything they could. I believe the facts are they did everything they could to make it right
Yeah, that's what
and
I've
learn
heard.
and learn from their mistakes.
Yeah.
Now that said,
I
I'm
can't
not.
watch their videos anymore. I don't.
Yeah,
I don't trust them.
this is a separating the art from the artist discussion that we're going to be having in a future episode. I want to make it known because I do think that's important.
Yeah.
I struggle with that too. You said it early in the episode. If you, and it seems like in the world we live in, right? So we're talking about trust right now. So I think this is relevant. We're talking about trust in the world we live in. It didn't used to matter that people were different from us,
Right.
but we only knew how different. But now in a world where
In a world
everyone
where
knows everything about everyone,
yeah,
no one can keep their freaking mouth shut on the internet. I know I sound like old man yelling at cloud. I get
that's
it.
okay.
I get it. Um, in a world where you know everything about everyone, suddenly it has become relevant when someone's not just their political views, because I can disagree with someone politically and still
Oh,
get along with
sure.
them, but someone whose morals and values are in strict and stark contrast from yours, how do you then do business with them? How do you
Right.
give someone hard earned money if you know that their morals and values run against yours? I don't
Yeah.
think you can. And if you catch someone in a massive lie or fraud or something worse, it's hard to give them your business, your money, and your time. It just is. It
Yeah.
just is. I don't,
Absolutely.
it's a shame that it has to be that way, but
But it still
what are they?
is.
Right. What was, we used to talk about when if you keep your mouth shut, people will think you're a fool. But when you open your mouth, you relieve all doubt, right?
That's
Sometimes it's best not to just don't. The problem with social media though is that it's instant, right? People
and it's
feel
permanent.
and permanent. People feel something emotionally, they have a deep emotional response, and they see something that triggers them, and they have to say something right away and let the whole freaking world know it. And it's like, no, you did not need to do that. Call your therapist, have a conversation with your spouse, go in the
Right.
corner and scream into a pillow, but for frick's sake, do not post it on the internet
Of
where it
all
will live
places.
forever and you will
Yeah.
be judged for it forever. And
Yeah.
people will be making decisions about their money forever. So I don't know, but, and I know exactly the situation you're talking about, and it sucks, but see, it's affecting you. And it's been something like 10 years since that happened.
Yeah, see, I didn't even realize it was that long ago because I only found out about it a couple years ago, and
But,
it
but
completely changed my attitude towards that person.
exactly. All right. So we're talking about tips on how not to get screwed when you're. So we talked about doing your homework and shopping with reputable dealers. I'm going to say something I also have to work on: setting realistic expectations about the gear
Absolutely.
you're buying. How often have we had that like Christmas morning feeling when you out for delivery with
Yeah.
UPS and you're like, this is going to be the greatest thing since canned beer. I'm going to love this more than my children. I mean, this thing's going to change my
My
life.
life. Yeah.
And then it shows up and you plug in and you're like, this is hot garbage. What was I thinking? And you immediately like request refund. You're like, one, set realistic expectations, and then understand you need to maybe live with it for a minute. Like,
Yeah.
especially with guitars, they need to be set up, they need to come to temperature. So don't open those boxes right away. With amplifiers, maybe there's something wrong with it, right? Or especially with tube amps, but with pedals, like adjust settings. Like,
Yeah.
don't just try presets, in other words, with digital gear, like really get into it. So I think be realistic with your expectations.
Yeah. And I would recommend to people get one good set of headphones,
Mm.
over ear, high quality, spend the money. And before you buy anything, listen to that product demo again through your really good headphones. There that takes the earbud thing out of it. It takes the laptop speakers out of it. it takes, I mean, I have fairly decent speakers hooked up to my computer, but nothing compares to a really good set of headphones. And that will help you, I think, make that final judgment. That's one of the things I always do. If I see something when I'm downstairs watching a product demo on YouTube through the TV, if I really start thinking I want to buy it, I will go upstairs to my computer, pull it up again, and throw on my headphones
That's a
and
great
get
tip.
a cleaner signal path.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Do you have
All
anything you
right.
want to add to that? Because it's almost time for dessert. I'm
That's
excited about dessert
oh,
today.
I left room for dessert, and I have to tell you, I think this is a great discussion. I always appreciate your insight, your humor,
Thank
your
you.
candor, and your honesty. I think as the world continues to move more towards global economy, more towards internet based shopping, I think we're going to have to get used to no longer having things in our hands or in person.
Yeah,
So I think demos online are going to become more and more important. I think we need to get better at, understanding who we can trust, what we absorb, and how we process that information, and level set with ourselves. Like, understand you're going to get gear that just isn't for you, but if you set yourself up for success, I think you'll be in a good place.
definitely, definitely. So today and in this episode for dessert, we're talking about music that matters. It's my turn to pick. In our debut episode, we talked about AC/DC's Back in Black, which I think was a fantastic choice. And I'm gonna kind of go to the other end of the rock spectrum. And my pick, are you sitting down?
This is a hot take. I've been sitting for the last hour and 15 minutes.
My pick for music that matters for this episode is Traveling Wilburys Volume 1, which was released in 1988.
Man,
Now,
what a cool pick, by the way, and out of left field.
yeah, and here's the thing, I got into a discussion 2 days before we were starting to set all this up about the concept of the supergroup and how, and that's probably a topic for a future episode, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna throw down right now, most of them are not super because you never heard of them. Right? Uh,
Right.
but in this case, the Traveling Wilburys was a band in the late 1980s consisting of, are you ready for this? It was the brainchild of George Harrison, who you may have heard of. He was in a band called the Beatles,
The what
and
now?
the Beatles.
Okay.
Uh, they had some minor success around, locally.
Okay.
And Jeff Lynne, who was the person really driving Electric Light Orchestra, popularly known as ELO, another British band. I don't think people know that ELO is a British band. But George Harrison and Jeff Lynne had been working together on some recording projects for George Harrison.
Right.
And they got this idea, who, if we were going to make a band, who would we want in the band? And George Harrison said, well, my pick would be Bob Dylan. And Jeff Lynne said, well, my pick would be Roy Orbison. And so they just reached out to those guys and said, hey, you want to come over and jam and maybe write some songs? And they were into it. And then George Harrison said, well, great. I need to go pick up this guitar that I left at Tom Petty's house. And he was over there at Tom Petty's house picking up the guitar, or Tom Petty brought the guitar to him and it came up. And Tom Petty said, well, none of those guys are bass players. Do you need a bass player? I'll be your bass player.
Oh man.
And so now we've got Bob Dylan, the voice of a generation in folk music, whether acoustic or electric, George Harrison, the man who literally launched a million guitar players, Roy Orbison, who has possibly the sweetest tenor in rock and roll, early rock and roll ever, Jeff Lynne, a production genius, and Tom Petty, who is a killer songwriter. And all of these guys, killer songwriters. And they sit down for 2 weeks in, I forget whose house it was. It was somebody else famous. I have to look. Now it just escaped me and I'm not going to find it fast enough. It was some other person's house, some other famous person.
This
And
is basically the Avengers of
yeah,
music.
it really is. And they wrote a song a day.
As
They,
as you do.
yeah, they kind of they traded lead vocals and then just decided collectively which sounded best. uh they traded off vocals. They wrote the lyrics together. I mean, and all of those people are known as guitar players. Maybe not, other than George Harrison, they're not necessarily known as lead guitar players. And you can hear Harrison's lead and slide work, especially, all over this record.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot of acoustic guitars, some keyboards, and it's not really like a guitar album, but it's an amazing piece of work and a real snapshot, especially in the late 80s. This is at the end of hair metal, right before grunge kicks in 2-3 years later, right? Nirvana had put their first album out, I think, in 88 there, but Nevermind wasn't out yet. Pearl
Nope.
Jam was still on the horizon.
Soundgarden was 89.
Yeah, so this is right on the cusp of the massive shift in the industry from glam or hair metal to grunge.
Mm-hmm.
And here's an album that comes out of nowhere featuring an astonishing level of talent. And it really is a one-off, because unfortunately Roy Orbison passed away from a heart attack just 2 months after the album came out. It was the last thing he recorded.
So much so that when they made a video, remember videos, they had to feature Roy, but I don't believe it was like, didn't they have to do something for Roy?
Yeah,
in
the
empty chair or something?
I think the second video, whenever he had the lead line, they had a rocking chair that was rocking with a picture of him in it.
Yeah.
And it was just such a poignant thing, and that was, not only did it revitalize the careers of Bob Dylan and Jeff Lynne especially, but it also gave Tom Petty a real kick. And it gave him the confidence that he needed to do a solo album, which sounded just like a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers album, if you ask me, but still, where he didn't have his support network, he was doing it himself.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing. And it was such a burst of freshness and positivity in a widely accessible format, but it wasn't cheesy and it wasn't sappy. It was just this amazing snapshot of music from 5 people who are, without any argument from me, masters of the medium.
There's classic Americana. Like, if you're a fan of, like, honestly, it sounds more at times like it's a Bob Dylan record, then it's a Tom Petty record, then it's a George. Like, every song has a little bit of their personality blended in, and it, depending on who you are, you hear. That's the amazing thing. Like, no one outshined anyone, but everyone shined.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really, really loved about the whole thing is they all embraced it. Like, they became a band,
right?
The credits for the album, they all took the last name of Wilbury. They had a backstory that they were all, half brothers, and they really
had fun. They had fun.
They had fun. And remember, being in a band is supposed to be fun,
mm-hmm.
And it's just this, and it, at a time when I would gravitate to Rat and Iron Maiden and other, Metallica, even, that's very early Metallica era. It was an album that I could listen to and be swept away by the songwriting. So it was an important album for me because it introduced me, really reminded me about songwriting. I'd only been playing guitar for maybe 3.5 years, 4 years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was all about the riff, and it had to be fast, and it had to be hard, and it had to be heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And here come these titans of the music world strumming their acoustic guitars.
Right.
And it was still an amazing album. And I think it's definitely one that deserves to be looked on and tracked down and listened to.
I agree. It was the antithesis of what I was listening to at the time.
Absolutely.
I was listening to Guitar Heroes at the time. A lot of heavy rock, like you, a lot of heavy rock and metal. And then this came out, and despite how I felt about that style of music at the time, I was just drawn. I could not believe how cool it sounded. And I it was my really, I'm not going to say introduction, because I knew who all of these musicians were. Last week I mentioned one of the albums that was like one of my first like rock albums
Yeah,
was
was it ELO?
Right. So I knew even Jeff Lynne, I knew who the guy was, but there's a lot, like you could argue that this Americana, it was like a little country, a little rock and roll, a little folk music, not what I was listening to. And then I hear this stuff and I'm like, wow, this is just the best of all of them right now.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
given when it came out and given what we were listening to at the time, this was like a fun break from all the seriousness of hard rock and metal and
Yeah.
glam and all that crap. And it was like, hey, remember this was here first, and we're still good. And it got me. I listening to this album got me pulling old ELO. It got me pulling old George Harrison and Beatles records out. Like, man, I forgot how good this stuff was.
Yeah.
And so for me, it launched. Not only was it a great album, but it launched like a reappreciation of that, you know, the roots for me. And yeah,
Yeah.
I'll never forget when this album came out. It was just amazing and fun. It was just fun.
Yeah, and all at the time, all I knew about Roy Orbison was that he was an old time early rock and roll guy, and he had written "Pretty Woman" that Van Halen did,
Mm-hmm.
that Van Halen's stellar cover of "Pretty Woman," and so I had heard the original version by Roy Orbison, but it didn't register with me, and I listened to him sing. He has such a beautiful, distinctive voice that I went back and like I went out and bought two Roy Orbison albums as a result of this. You know,
Yeah.
I had Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, I had Beatles. I didn't really get into Dylan. I've got one of his albums now that I think is still from his acoustic era. And it's fantastic. Now, Bob Dylan's voice is kind of an acquired taste. But in the context of what they were doing here, it really fit. And I always loved ELO because they had Queen levels of production, you know, and then strings,
Yeah.
and it was always just a great time.
And isn't it
Uh,
great how, despite having arguably five powerhouses and people with, I mean, a combined million years of studio experience, how understated this album is.
yeah, yeah.
So
They
clean and
all
crisp.
play to the song,
Yeah.
you know, and that and they did put out another album which they called Volume 3, um, which I think is hilarious.
Because
Uh,
math is hard. Numbers are weird.
yeah. And they talked about, you know, having this person or that person come in because Roy Orbison had passed away, and in the end they decided to just do it, the four of them. But they lost the second album. I don't think is as lightning in a bottle. You know, it's still really good, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have quite the raw feel and collaborative aspect to it.
Right.
But I still listen to it, you know, I just listened to Volume 1 more. So that was my choice, Traveling Wilburys Volume 1 for Music
Nice
That
pick, man.
Matters. Wrapping
Well
up
done.
the end of episode 2 here. We're going to be back very soon with episode 3. And Andrew, give us a preview of what episode 3 of Different Strings podcast is going to be about.
All right. So one more time, real quick, twitter.com/diffstringspod, youtube.com/different strings podcast, Facebook, search for Different Strings Podcast, Instagram, different.strings.pod, and email differentstringspodcast@gmail.com. And our next episode, we're going to be talking about a little bit of a love letter to our local mom and pop shops, right? And in the future of retail and what it looks like, right? So, you know, we talked a little bit about it today. We no longer get to put our hands on stuff. Well, could we maybe in the future one day get to do that again? I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. So this is Wes, and saying thank you from me and Andrew. We're going to sign off here on Different Strings, and we will see you next time.
All right. Be well. Take care, everyone.